Welcome, everyone. Of course, Sister Denise, hello. This is our third and last session of the Free Will and Predestination. And I've said this before, and I can't say it enough. But really, when I heard it again, like recently, I felt there was this like surge of energy. And I thought this must be what Baba means when he says knowledge is also like an injection. So let me say that it is extremely recommended to watch the first two sessions. And it is always, even independently, it is always good and very beneficial for one to understand and to progress. And so, welcome. Let us now go straight into the session. Sister Denise.
Thank you very much, Rose, and it's lovely to see everyone. I'm speaking today from Paris using a different camera, so you see me a little bit differently, but I think it's fine. We would like to continue where we left off the last time. And I think the format of going through the write-up little bit by little bit seems to work quite well. And then we can have a discussion between Rose and myself and take your questions afterwards. So, Sister Maggie will bring the sentences up on the screen so you can see that. So, the context in which we're looking at thought, freedom, free will, and predestination is that this cycle, which describes the free will and predestination, is an instrument which is called a yantra. So we're going to look today at the circumstances in which to use this yantra. And so it is used during war. So life is very often quite an uphill struggle. And there is the inner war and the outer war. So the outer war we see on the media, but the inner war is going on inside our head and our heart. And this yantra is specially to help us to manage the inner war, which is sometimes a response to the outer war. So whenever a series of waste thoughts is triggered, it is a signal to initiate the rotation of a cycle. So waste thoughts are what you think when you hear about something which is distressing or disturbing. And this is because whenever something is perceived by us, we hear about it, we see it, or we hear itself. If we don't like something, it is because it's against our value system. And because it's against our value system, we have created our value system based on analysis of our life experience in the early part of our lives, and then we decide what values we will live by. And it varies from individual to individual. So anything that goes against your values will trigger a reaction, which is in a way analytical, because you will think that it should not be like this. This is against my values. How can they do this? And it escalates and it goes in circles. So this yantra, this instrument, also goes in circles. It goes round and round as the rotation of the cycle. And when you're rotating the cycle, you're rotating concepts which are pure. And this is very different to thoughts about an event or a behavior or an occurrence that you perceive through your senses. And the thoughts that are activated by rotating the cycle are thoughts that arise from the knowledge that is given to us by incorporeal God. So when you are using these thoughts, you have to be very specific that it's absolutely relevant to what triggered the storm of waste thoughts. So you have to be able to select from your big library of points of information that are there in the spiritual knowledge, and select those ones that are applicable to neutralize the trigger effect of the storm that created these waste thoughts. So, and these waste thoughts could be anything from a light breeze, slightly distressing, to a hurricane, which absolutely overwhelms you, takes you over, and that you can do nothing about. And it's interesting to note that in the Bhagavad Gita, it talks about exactly how storms carry you. That means carry your thoughts, your feelings, your mind, just the same way that a hurricane will carry boats or ships on the ocean, and you can't do anything because the hurricane is too powerful. Now, by using this yantra, which is the same shape as a hurricane because it's a vortex, but the hurricane vortex tosses you around mostly because you're on the edge of it or somewhere in the middle. But as you know, in a hurricane, there is the eye of the storm, which is completely quiet. And that is also quite an interesting analogy, because when you are using the thoughts that are given to us in the spiritual knowledge, thoughts which are particularly relevant to what has triggered your storm, there are many thoughts or points of information that apply specifically to neutralizing that which disturbed you. And when you use those thoughts, rotate those thoughts around in your mind, it carries you to the still center point where you can be quiet. Because you've come to terms with what's going on and you're seeing it in the light of the spiritual knowledge with your inner eye, which is also called your third eye. And so in that way, you become much more able to handle these winds than people who don't have any knowledge or skill in the use of this yantra. And I think another thing that is good to know is that if you are using it and there are people around you who see you being stable and steady in the middle of the same storm that they are in, that also allows them to find a quiet place and a centralized place in the storm so that they too can ride it out. So this is a very good service. Swa-darshan chakra, it is a weapon. And you find the Swa-darshan chakra in the Gita, it's spoken about, and in the Hindu iconography, you always see the Swa-darshan chakra and two particular characters. And this is Vishnu and Krishna. There's a male characters, but you also find it on the goddesses, the Shaktis, the goddesses who have many, many arms. In the hands, at least one of the weapons is the discus. And they have many other weapons as well. But this discus weapon is the most powerful because it operates to sort out your mind, to keep your mind stable and steady, and also that you have at your disposal exactly the right thoughts. Now, thoughts are compared with arrows. So on the one hand, you have this discus, which creates stability because it's a gyroscope also. And it keeps your mind steady. Also, you have the arrows of specific thoughts that you can shoot into the fray so that you become the victor in that particular battle. And in our battles, the things that you have to fight against are overwhelming emotions, doubt, irritation, despair, many, many different kinds of negative emotions which weaken you, seriously weaken you. And when you're weak, then you can easily get defeated. But the Swadarshana chakra is such a weapon that keeps you able to make contact with the thoughts that empower you. And in that way, you're dealing with your battles from an empowered state and not from a weakened state, which means you have a very good chance to win. We mentioned Vishnu. So Vishnu has 4 hands and he has other weapons. So he has the conch shell, which refers to your words, the lotus, which refers to acts, and the mace, which refers to firm, decisive intention. And that includes also the power to say no and the power to say my way and make yourself really assertive. And life, most of the time, everything goes along quite comfortably, but every so often there are challenges. If you are on the battlefield of life, that means you're a warrior, and a warrior is aware that there can be ambush, there can be sudden attacks from out of nowhere. So the warrior must be always ready. And if you are living a kind of double life, you have your normal everyday life, which is just like everybody else. But behind that, because of your spiritual practice and because of your study, you're at the ready. And you have the sense of how things go, because the Swadarshana chakra is also a representation of the way things go in life, the way situations arise, persist, and then fade away, the way people respond and react to different kinds of stimuli. So you have a good sense of how things go, which means to be ready while knowing how things go means you're in a very good position to handle them as long as you stay awake. So that's very important. And so you make sure that you're not limited to just the Swadarshana chakra, but that you know how to use what words when, and that you're fast and you know what acts to perform, and that you're very aware that there are some situations that you can do nothing about. And in that case, you have to be just detached. But most of the time, circumstances call on you to make a decision, to act, to do something. And so when you notice that that is what's needed, then you can come right in and bring to bear your mace. So then you're using them in conjunction with the Swadarshana chakra. The Swadarshana chakra is also the spinning swastika. And people have been conditioned to have a particular reaction to the swastika because of how it was used in the Second World War. And also it is used by people who I mean, there is an expression, neo-Nazis, which refers to people who are some kind of thug and they wish to cause harm to others. So the swastika has come to mean that it's a sign of causing harm, it's a sign of violence and oppression and all of this. So most people associate it with that. And when they see the word swastika on a piece of paper or when they see the sign of the swastika, it triggers all sorts of negative feelings. But in fact, the swastika is a sign of good fortune. And the actual word means to know the self. And the swastika, when it's spinning, is spun normally in a clockwise direction. That means that is the direction of time, that is the direction of events, that is how things go. And if you spin it the other way, the anti-clockwise, it's how things were. So you're looking at what has troubled you, as opposed to when you're putting it in the clockwise direction, you're looking at what the solutions are. So one of the things that happens when there is the anti-clockwise spinning, which is called Pardarshan chakra, your clash of values with other people gets activated, and this creates conflict. So Pardarshan chakra means your mind is occupied with the behavior of someone who has disturbed you in some way. And what spiritual knowledge tells you is that you are responsible for your own spiritual practice and you're not responsible for somebody else's. And by extension, you're responsible for what you do in life. And you cannot really control what other people do, but you have a lot of options about how you respond to it. So if you get occupied with the behavior of someone who has disturbed you, it means that your attention is not on yourself, it's not on solutions, it's not balanced, and you are likely to be taken over by your preoccupation with your sense perception. And this is called something that will deceive you. So you have to be careful about that. So when the Pardarshan chakra is spinning in your thoughts, you are thinking about other people, which means you are creating karmic accounts and karmic bondages with that person or those people. And it's quite important to remain aware about that, because when you find yourself getting triggered and spinning off into the Pardarshan chakra, you can intercept that situation by reminding yourself that all you're doing is getting into karmic debt and karmic bondage. And do you really want that? And I think that's quite powerful, because it'll be enough to stop you from carrying on with this preoccupation with the other people, and then you just return to yourself. You cannot spin a wheel in two directions at the same time. It breaks the machinery. So in a car, you have a gearbox, and in the gearbox, you can change up or change down, or you can go into reverse. But if you would go from going forward very quickly straight into going in reverse, you would definitely break your transmission system. And so in between the gears, there is a neutral spot. And this is what has to happen in the shift over from Pardarshan chakra to Swadarshana chakra. You have to find a way to stop and go into neutral. And so this idea that, okay, if I carry on like this, I'm creating karmic accounts and karmic bondages, and I really don't want that, because my whole purpose of doing this spiritual practice is to finish my karmic accounts and bondages and not create new ones. So this is a useful thought to bring you into neutral and stop for a while, and then put yourself into a gear which corresponds to the Swadarshana chakra, and no longer going in reverse and getting all these karmic accounts. So these circumstances of the inner war should be considered as tests. Every time something happens, instead of thinking this is wrong and that is wrong and this person did wrong and so on and so forth, you bring yourself into neutral by this idea that this is a test. Okay, it's a test. So you have to stop and think, what kind of test is this? What is it a test of? Is this something that keeps happening that I haven't yet got the message? Let me look at it closely so I do get the message. What is the message? And then really take a minute to think about, among all the many, many points of knowledge that you're aware of, what is the relevant point here which can allow you to be clear, to have like a moment of insight, almost an aha moment, and then you use that point to get your Swadarshana chakra going, because you need energy to get the cycle to spin. You can't just plug it into the wall like you would with any other spinning machine. You have to get energy from your own soul in the form of a relevant point that is so clear and so meaningful and so true that it's got power. And then you move into the stream of thoughts that this clear aha moment initiates. And in that way, you are handling the test and understanding the situation deeper, better. And this is called success. Tests are tests of faith. I think this is true. And when you think about tests being tests of faith, it means you have to think about what faith means. And we have been given these 4 areas where we need to have faith, where we often don't have faith. And wherever our faith is weak, this is where we will be tested, because when you get a test, you're also getting a message. Sometimes you fail the test, which is also a message. And you have to think about having weak or being of little faith. And so you have to shore yourself up and strengthen your faith. So the first one is, of course, yourself. Do you have faith in yourself? That means, do you think you're up for the challenge? Do you have respect for yourself at a deep level? Do you understand who you are? And don't forget, do you recognize that you are capable? Are you with yourself or against yourself? If you're against yourself, you can't succeed. The second one is faith in God. So faith in God means, obviously, just by yourself, you can do nothing. So you need to be linked to God. And, some people think that God is busy with other people and is not going to be there for you. But that means you haven't understood yourself. and you haven't understood God. And God is fast, when you need his participation, he's right there any second. And you need to not doubt that. If you think low of yourself, then you will create the idea that God will not pay attention to you because other people are more interesting. So this is sabotage of the self. And faith in God also includes having faith that what he's telling you is the right thing. And it is also said that if you want to follow the directions that God is giving you, you need courage. So that means it's difficult. Tests are not easy. And having faith in God when there are no signs that God is there for you is a test, because faith means that you understand something without constantly having guarantees, because there are no guarantees. When you doubt, you look for guarantees. When you have faith, you understand there are no guarantees, but it's not about guarantees. It's about you knowing, I am here, God is with me, and together we will handle this situation, because God plus one is always more powerful than any challenge. The third area where we are tested is our faith in drama. So what does this mean? We hear a lot about the secrets of drama. We hear about drama in many ways. It's predestined. There is free will. This is our main topic, this paradox of predestination and free will. So what does it mean to have faith in drama? Generally speaking, people decide for themselves whether any particular circumstance is favorable or unfavorable. And faith in drama means that even if you are in the midst of an unfavorable circumstance, if you look at it closely, you'll be able to discern that the unfavorableness of it is an appearance, but that behind that appearance, there is something which is very favorable to you. If you can discern it and hold on to it, then you can really recognize that whatever is the scene in drama, it is actually very good, beneficial for me, to my advantage. If I just look at the appearances, I'll miss the reality. So this is really a test of us being too superficial in our evaluation of what's going on around us. And these tests are also, the purpose of the test is to make us perceive more deeply and less superficially. We also have to have faith in the direction of drama. You see, most people are busy trying to save the world. And nowadays you get an expression that is getting quite common, which is, well, if you can't save the world, save yourself. And that's actually quite good, because you really can't save the world, but there's a lot you can do for yourself. According to the drama knowledge, the world is dying, and everything about the world is dying. But spiritual knowledge says that it's not possible for anything that lives to not die, and it's not possible for anything dead to not live. You need to know about this. This is quite deep, because in a world of linear thinking, a world of materialism, you could never think like that. But this is also straight from the Bhagavad Gita, anything that is alive will die, and anything that is dead will live. So when you confront yourself around the reality that the world is dying, and that this is why all the scenes in it are so difficult to bear, are so distressing, so perplexing and heartbreaking, is because death is like that. But death is not the end point. Death is a gateway you have to pass through. And you cannot die without dying. You don't just, somebody doesn't just shoot you in the head and you die instantly without having any time to think about it. It does happen, but mostly not. Most of us are getting old and losing capability, physical, mental, and so on. And the world is like an entity, Mother Earth. They speak of Mother Earth. And so the last scenes of the drama are about the dying of the world and eventually death of the world as we know it, followed by rebirth and recreation. And so where should our mind be? Should we be looking at all the things that are falling into disrepair and collapse and death? That's a sense perception. That's too visible. That's too obvious. We have to look further and look at what's behind that, the rejuvenation, the new life that is preparing itself. And we need to link ourselves with that. And I think that then it's easy for us to appreciate that all the scenes of the drama are talking to us about how we must let go of the old and align ourselves with the new and not spend too much time thinking about the old because it's going anyway. Nothing you can do about that. But put your energy with the new. The fourth area of having faith is other people. Where I live here in France, there is a very famous expression which comes from Jean-Paul Sartre's very well-known play called EGY Clos. And the expression from this play is hell is other people. And in your relationships, you find that there are some people that you get along with quite well, but there are also quite a few people that are hell for you, hell to be with. They make your life hell, and you use that expression. And so this concept of having faith in others needs to be thought about. That what does it mean to have faith in people who you don't agree with, you have a completely different value system? And it's really a device, a spiritual practice, which tells you that there's a spiritual law that if you are in antagonistic relationship with other people, you get bound to them. So that being the case, another person's activity or existence or behavior, if it bothers you, you are going to pay a high price for allowing that to take over. So you need to look at all the spiritual knowledge you know and apply a point or several points to the thing that is capable of getting you caught up in bad karmic accounts so that you can use a different set of triggers and understand the necessity of the existence of those people and what they're doing, and then also look into your treasure store of knowledge to see how you can present this situation to yourself such that everything makes sense. Once you see that it all makes sense for everything to be this way, whether it's pleasant or not pleasant is secondary. If it makes sense and you can see the relevance and usefulness of it, you can work with it. And then you can have faith in others. Another area of faith in others that I think is very important is that, you want other people to be there for you. And if you don't have faith that they will be there for you, then you have doubt. And having doubt in others actually interferes with all of the benefit that they are ready to provide you with. You are sabotaging the goodness of your relationship with others and giving yourself trouble unnecessarily. So this is also a very important part of faith in others. So as you pass these tests, what are the signs of passing the tests? Is you're stable, focused, proactive, and decisive. If you fail, it's indicated by the fact that you are reactive, you embarrass yourself, you assume something that's not true and act on it, and you look like a fool. And that means you failed the test. You didn't understand what you're doing. So this circumstance of having tests in the area of yourself, in the area of your relationship with God and drama and other people is very, very important, because it is through these tests that you actually progress and you refine your quality as a human being. And one of the definitions of yoga, which is also given in the Gita, is yoga means skill in action. And you cannot act skillfully if you don't have faith. So in your interaction with yourself, with God, with drama, and with others, if you're doing everything in yoga, it means you're doing it skillfully. You have a precision about how you conduct yourself. You have a good balance of being diplomatic and accurate and giving space, being sometimes the observer, sometimes acting. You have to have a very good intuitive sense of how to conduct yourself moment by moment as circumstances change. And this is a continuous assessment that's going on in our university of life. So it's good. All the elements of the test circumstances have to be assigned a meaning or a value instantly. This is quite important. When you're in a test, when you're in a situation, you usually don't quite understand what it is. And the first thing you have to do is figure out, what is this? That means you give it a meaning and a value, and you recognize its function. Because then you use that evaluation and understanding in the sets of thoughts that you use to rotate your Swadarshana chakra and in your analysis of the situation, so that your action is considered and you are stable and steady. It's always a great mistake to act when you're emotionally aroused, whether it's positive or negative. And so it is said, this is something very important in the Sufi tradition, that never make a decision when you are happy or when you are sad. So this is very useful to know about. And this is also there in the Gita, that make yourself absolutely dispassionate about everything and then take action. So for that, you need to use specific trains of thought and analysis of circumstances. Now, this is called Tivra Purusharat. Usually we hear this expression translated as intense effort, but you can also look at it as fast effort, because Tivra actually means fast. And Purusharat, there's another way to interpret it other than effort. The way I always think of it, Purush means the soul, yourself, and Arat means for the sake of. So be really a fast responder for the sake of yourself, because what's at stake in any situation is yourself. You're really not responsible for the other players. You're responsible for yourself. So in this practice, you need to be fast, extremely fast and mentally agile to do this work instantly. The problem is if you hesitate, and very often people are uncertain and then they hesitate, and then the window of opportunity stays open only for an instant. So when the window of opportunity closes and then you act, it's too late. The window's already closed. So we have to also practice having so much faith in our interpretation of circumstances that we can act fast, and even if other people react strongly against it. But when you take a considered but rapid action, then you can stand by it, and you can argue for why you did this then, and win the argument. Another important question to consider is, are you driven by events or do you drive events? Mostly, a lot of people think they are victims of circumstances. Circumstance happen, nothing you can do about it, and so that's that, You make yourself into a victim with that kind of thinking. Then you say, well, how do you drive events? You are not normally someone who causes circumstances to happen in a certain way. And this is because of not really knowing the depth of karma philosophy. If you understand the drama well, and you understand the karma philosophy well, you can see that there is a correlation between what happens in the drama and what you do leading up to any present moment, which has lots of circumstances in it. So it is very good to understand that there is a logic in the drama. And while the drama is predestined, I also experience quite a lot that It's like drama has a mind of its own, and there is an intelligence to the succession of events and circumstances. And if we can be so tuned in and aligned with the drama, you can anticipate the way that drama is going to go and understand the logic of it. And then you can also you have the experience that even though it's predestined, you can actually make it go the way you want it to go. And I've actually witnessed this in very, very powerful yogis and some of the dadis who really had this ability to be in tune and aligned with the drama such that they could make it go the way they wanted. And not that many people can do that because it does require a strong mind, strong will, detachment, and the sort of recognition of the logic of the drama. And many times the drama could go either way, this way or that way, which means that it's offering you the opportunity to apply your free will in that predestined circumstance where you're at like a fork in the road and you decide which fork to take, and drama will go along with it because you have recognized that here's a moment, it could go this way, it could go that way. What do you want? Take the chance and decide. Then you are someone who drives events. Whatever you decide, whatever you want, whatever you claim, there's always a price to pay. And I find very often people will calculate and take what we might call the easy way out, which is always not so easy and much more expensive. But if you make a choice which is according to you right and with integrity and aligned with drama, it's what is needed. You may pay a high price, but by doing that, what you get is of much greater value than the price you paid. So ultimately, it's a winning situation for you, and you don't feel that you're a victim of circumstances. An event is a trigger of your sanskaras, which are personality traits and tendencies. But if you act according to your old sanskaras, it means you're driven by events. Acting according to your old sanskaras means reacting to the event in a way consistent with your habits and personality. If you're fast, you instantly recognize that a trigger was activated. You discern what the test is. You instantly apply the Swadarshana chakra and neutralize the trigger. So your action is according to your use of the weapon, and this is called free will. So I think we actually covered it in the last few minutes. So let's go to the next one. Everyone has their own triggers, and you have to know what they are. These are your Achilles heels. This is a very important thing. You've got to know your strengths. You also have to know your weaknesses, and there are many. Where you're weak, these Achilles heels arise from past karmic accounts, from trauma, from toxic morality, or toxic religious, educational, parental, and other moral authorities. So this doesn't mean that all morality is toxic and all religious, educational, parental, and other moral authorities are toxic, but quite a lot are. And you have to know the difference, which is toxic, which is not toxic. There are complex games going on. There are predators. There are temptations, forms of corruption, and many things that move you from your seat of self-honor. So seat of self-honor is very, very important. Sometimes it's called your self-respect. I like the word self-honor because it's not a phrase that's used in all sorts of different ways, like self-respect has hundreds of meanings. But to honor yourself, to recognize who you are, to value yourself, and be, first of all, conscious of who you are, and secondarily, look at the game's predators, temptations, and forms of corruption and decide, do you want to go for that or not? Because you don't have to. So these are just ways that you become more and more a master of your circumstances and less a victim. And if you do get to be a victim of circumstances or a victim of your weaknesses, you feel embarrassment or shame. And this is a most weakening feeling to have. So we need to be careful not to fall into that bad pool of mud. So application of the Swadarshana chakra restores you instantly to your position on your seat of self-honor. That means you immediately stabilize yourself, you immediately take up points that bring you into your power, and then you stay. So all these triggers are also called Maya. We talked earlier about storms, so storms of Maya, all these energies that want to take you away from where you're going. So they derive from materialism, which means linear thinking, and from the illusion and delusion, which arise from sense perception. So materialism and sense perception are basically the same thing. And that means repeatedly shift into spherical thinking. Spherical thinking is like you are in the middle of the drama, and the drama is not like a dinner plate, but like a transparent ball, big glass ball with lots and lots of events happening all over the place, which are impacting you, but you keep seeing the big picture, and then you can handle everything well. So spherical thinking, soul consciousness. And in this way, you're establishing your mastery over the game. You understand there is a game going on here, and you have to be skilled in action, and that's called the yogi. So as you gain clarity and you always keep yourself aware of the bigger picture so that you are not just seeing only a tiny little bit of what's going on, then you start to be able to apply your free will. And as you do this, you're very delighted with whatever is predestined because it corresponds with who you are. And I think one wonderful experience, at least which I had, which I'm sure you can have when you start looking at things in this way, is that the very, very best thing of all is that I am me. I'm totally happy with who I am, totally happy with whatever happened, good or bad. It's great. It made me who I am. And whatever is destined is the best. So there you have this experience of satisfaction, a feeling of very easy to accept what's going on and work with it easily. This is a good space to be in. So that brings us to the end of our write-up. So I would like to turn it over to Sister Rose, and we can maybe talk about some of the points that came up in your mind, any questions that anyone may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Denise. So before going into the discussion or the question and answer portion, let us have a moment of silence.
I think take a moment to imagine yourself right in the middle of this big, big sphere of memories of events and visions of future, and you're right in the middle, and they are floating around, and you are the master of them. Even if everything is spinning around you like a hurricane, you're still in the silent space in the middle. The eye of the storm.
I realized that the skill to figure out, to know, to understand, to discern is very essential because I can interpret it in one way and there will be a consequence to that decision. And then later on, I realized that it could have been better if I did it another way.
Exactly. Hindsight is always 20/20 vision. But this is why I think we have to take risks.
Mm.
And if you take a reckless risk, an unconsidered risk, it's very different from when you have considered whatever needs to be considered and you prepare yourself to be wise, even among unknowns. You will be taking a calculated risk as opposed to a reckless risk. And then even though you may say, okay, well, in hindsight, I could have done it better, but you wouldn't be ashamed or embarrassed of what you did because you had made a calculation, you had done due diligence, and you did your best, and it becomes something that you can accept, you see. And then for the future, maybe you do it better next time, but you become, I think, you say, okay, I made that decision and I will live with the consequences. Now that's manageable.
In the beginning, you mentioned that the thought process must be completely relevant to what triggered the stream of waste thoughts. So how do you figure out what is a completely relevant point that will help me resolve this stream of waste thought?
Something happens and it triggers a reaction. And your reaction takes the form of what I'm thinking nowadays is something that is opposed to your value system. So you know what your value system is. And so you need to realize immediately that what's going on here is a clash of values.
Mm-hmm.
And the values of another person, they have their own logic, and you have your own logic. A clash of values can also be a cultural clash. That in my culture, the right way is like this, and in your culture, the right way is like that. And if I don't know and you don't know, we will bother each other because of lack of knowledge. If we are in the same culture and we have more or less the same values, then there is another thing that comes into it, which is that, okay, you have values, but you also have another agenda. And so you may have a value of honesty and integrity and so on and so forth. And at the same time, you're ambitious and you want to fulfill your ambition in a certain way that is actually a clash against your own values, which means also against the values of the person you're clashing with, which means that they are assuming that you have shared values and yet you're doing this other thing. So they have to be fast and understand that what's going on here is, although we have shared values, you have another agenda and you are not being completely honest. So I need to know this is a situation where there is some kind of double standards going on, and you had to discern it. And once you realize that the problem is this other person has another agenda to fulfill their ambitions in a way that goes against their value system, or you could say, this person is feeling undermined by my existence, because people compare themselves with each other, and you like to feel that you're on top of things, or that you are equal, if not better, than the other person. And if something happens where you feel that the other person has somehow got an edge over you, then that will trigger some sort of coping mechanism. Coping mechanisms come as a reaction to different traumas. So I think everybody grows up with a few traumas, some really bad ones and some little ones, but all the traumas produce coping mechanisms, which also get called character defects. So you may intellectually have all sorts of good principles and so on, but you also have a character defect that gets triggered when you feel diminished by looking at somebody and perceiving them as greater than you or more fortunate than you or something. And then this will affect your ego. Mm-hmm. The ego is a flip-flop between inferiority and superiority. So if you feel superior, you're comfortable with that. But if all of a sudden you feel inferior, then it knocks you for six and you are out of order, and you start operating in terms of your knee-jerk reactions, which go back to how you handled these things at the time when you experienced that sort of trauma, which initiated your ego problem. And so this is something you have to discern really fast. If you see, oops, my ego got pricked, and I suddenly shifted out of superiority into inferiority, which means that I was not real. Neither the inferiority nor the superiority is real. And so it's like an insight you get, a message you get, which says, guess what, self? You were sitting in body consciousness and you were in your ego and you didn't even notice. And then the circumstance triggered it, and then you reacted out of control because you didn't know that you were being body conscious or in your ego. And if you didn't have that situation, you'd never know. When you get a situation like that, it may be quite unpleasant and discombobulating, but hindsight, you take a look, you analyze, you say, this is the meaning of body consciousness, and I got in it without even noticing. And what that means is you're extending and expanding your understanding of what this body consciousness is, because body consciousness has never meant being conscious of your body. And people assume it. Body conscious means that you think you are something that you're not, whether it's higher or lower. And Daddy Janki used to say something quite interesting. She would say, it's very easy to be with people who you consider your seniors or people you consider your juniors, because you know how to function in an unequal relationship. But she said it's very, very difficult for people to be equal with each other. Because when you're equal, you're not performing, you're being real. Mm-hmm. And actually, that is a really good, I think, approach to soul consciousness. And I mean, Baba says everyone is number wise. So there are definitely areas where you're better than someone in some area and somebody else is better than you in another area and so on. But when you have a really good spiritual relationship, and I think all of us in the community of Raj Yogis, we have a circle of friends who are very much like our, Baba uses the word hamjins, you're equal. In France, you use the word semblable, which is a really good word, someone who is like you, on the same level in lots of ways. Of course, you stimulate each other and so on because everyone is different. But I think it's a very good thing to have good quality experience of a circle of good quality people who are your equals. And otherwise, you're always performing. You see, when you're with your equals, you don't perform, you just are. And I like that. I think that is a really good circumstance that helps us to have natural soul consciousness,
In a face of a situation where I see or I hear something and I get disturbed, and I know that, like theoretically, I'm thinking I shouldn't be doing this. It's creating karmic account, but then my feelings are saying something else. So how do I put a stop to this without suppressing, without pretending that it's not there?
I think there are occasions where our intellectual angle on things is not as valid as our feelings, because sometimes our feelings are intuitions about things which are right and which have the capacity to make us let go of our intellectual positioning, because sometimes our intellectual positioning is like a a default position that we have when we don't know what to have. You know, because we're so good at all of these points of information. And I think drama should and does sometimes push us out of this situation, so that we need to actually, see that there may be a conflict between the intellectual positioning and the feelings. And in some cases, it's necessary to pay attention to the feelings, because the intellectual positioning is intellectual arrogance, which is negative, you see. And there's a reality that we have to take a risk to shift out of it, because intellectual arrogance is ego mask, you see. Even if you have 1,000 points of information, all of which are true, you can still make it into an ego mask and still be in your ego and not really in reality. And in that situation, your feelings is like your heart saying, hey, come off it. Get with the program here and be real. And that's very important.
Thank you for that. But in the meantime, what do I do with the feelings?
There is something called managing feelings. And I think powers are the key. Because if you look at the list of our 8 powers and any other powers, they are, in a sense, instruments where we can feel the intensity of the feeling, listen to the feeling, and not get bent out of shape by it. Because one of the problems of not having spiritual power is that the feelings can make you out of balance. If you have the powers, you can hold your balance, you can contain the feelings without getting washed away by them, and still listen to their message and still become real, and not have to resort to the intellectual positioning, because you're strong enough to listen to the feelings. It doesn't take strength to adopt an intellectual positioning. It's the easiest thing in the world. And we all think we're marvelous, wonderful, and fantastic. But in reality, to allow yourself to feel your feelings and hold that and really discern, this is real, this is a reaction, this is what is this telling me? And there you can really start to open up your heart, listen to your heart, and then you have access to something which is actually much deeper than theoretical knowledge. See, it's always a challenge for a BK to go from theoretical to real. 99% stay theoretical, because real is too dangerous, you have to be really honest, and you need strength for that.
Yeah.
I think it's very important, because that's really a yogi, isn't it?
And I guess the process of that will also help in strengthening faith in myself.
Yes. And also in others, that, they won't turn against you when you're being real, and that when you are in the midst of feelings, and that you're actually in a very powerful state when you're in the midst of feelings that you can contain. But I think a person who uses a lot of the intellectual thing is a substitute for being. And as soon as you notice that, then you don't like it anymore and you want to be something different. But until you get there, you have to. It starts off theoretical in many cases.
Sister Denise, I guess this is the answer to the question here. So is it wrong to be 99% theoretical, which most BKs are?
Well, I wouldn't say necessarily that it's wrong, but we might say it's unfortunate. But it's inevitable because, we come in Gyan, which is knowledge. We learn all the knowledge, we distribute it, we talk it, and then Maya comes along and mucks up everything. And then you're along a way which you can't go backwards. You're trying to go forwards. You don't want to be stuck. You don't want to look bad, etc., etc., etc. But you have to get from the theoretical to the real, whether you like it or not. And the sooner the better. So if we create a culture of being theoretical talking heads, that's okay, but it's not very effective in terms of accomplishing the goal, which is to be the self.
Yeah.
Why are we here is to become true to ourselves, which involves a healing process. So if you want to heal from all of your contaminations and corruptions and so on, then you have to take off all your bandages. And then all the pus and blood falls out, and that doesn't look good. So you don't want anyone to see. So you go back to being theoretical. But as you accumulate the powers and you become more sure of yourself, I think that you are then willing to go through all this process and actually become. Raj Yoga is not particularly easy, and it's not particularly looking good.
Mm.
A lot of people are very interested in it being easy and looking good. So we have to overcome that.
But it's also not very interesting to be in that atmosphere of just theoretical.
Oh, no, it makes you nuts. You can't bear it. You try and find an excuse to leave and
Exactly.
put your earphones in and listen to something else. There's so much of that goes on. You try and be polite, but it's a challenge. And I think that talking about it is beneficial, because then instead of being some sort of secret thing that nobody wants to admit to, it then becomes something that, we none of us like the theoretical. So, okay, let's see what we can do about getting past the theoretical, and maybe we can accelerate the process.
Yeah. Thank you. So there are some questions here, Denise. I find that despite being the master for the moment, it does not change or solve the karmic thing of the past.
Your past karma will appear in terms of circumstances, difficulties, health problems, mental instabilities, and so on. And again, the powers are relevant because they allow you to handle the feelings. And mastery is much more about that than being a master when you're not having any problems. Anybody can be peaceful in a peaceful situation. But I remember one Murli, Avyak Murli, in which Baba said this, and the real peace is the one who can be at peace when all hell is breaking loose inside your head and outside your body. So that's when you find out whether you're a master or not when everything is going nicely. And this is why sometimes it's difficult to know whether you're afraid of death or not until you actually face imminent death or you have a near-death experience. You really cannot answer that question because you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And on the other hand, some BKs who are in the theoretical will say, no, I am an immortal soul. I'm not afraid of death.
Well, we all do that, but it doesn't mean anything because you have to prove it. And you can't prove it until you actually stared at death right in the face and checked whether or not you're afraid. And you can be not afraid of one kind of death, but afraid of another kind of death. Ego death is a big one. And the things that come up in our relationships, in our circumstances, tend a lot to put us in a situation where we have to die from the ego. Baba talks a lot about dying, Marjiva Janam, the death while alive and all that. But the ego death is a very big one. And when you can't see your ego, which nobody can, other people can see your ego much better, but not necessarily clearly. I think the key is to try to be able to see your ego, because then you know what you're dealing with, but it's difficult. And these tests are helpful because they do bring you close to a point where you can see your ego, especially when you fail the test. You see the ego for a second, but you did see it. It's like, a hidden enemy in a way. Once you can see it, you know what you're dealing with. But if you can't see it, it's driving you all the time.
There's another question. In a more and more disturbed world, more and more psycho-hygiene, distance to bad influence is needed. Not easy in a more and more dirty, enerving surrounding where the plagues increase. How to bear that or how to handle that?
And this is where your powers come in. It's interesting that the powers keep coming up as the answer to the questions, because you have to be able to tolerate, endure, accommodate, discern, decide how you're going to handle each instance as it arises and not be fazed by it. And yes, it said in the Murli today, God is almighty and Maya is almighty and getting mightier. So watch out. We have to be able to keep up with it. I think once you start your spiritual practice, interesting, he said yesterday, if you fail, you cannot repeat the year. And there's no question of repeating anything. You just have only one chance. And if you fail, use that failure to your advantage. Don't let it be a setback. Or if you have a setback, then catch up. No matter what, you've got to keep up with the fact that opposition is going to be increasing as the days go by. And you cannot turn the clock back or make it go away. You just must hang in there. And you owe it to yourself to do whatever you can. Don't waste your time and energy, because there's no way out. You have to do it.
Speaking of spiritual powers, in the same way, it's also important to understand what these powers really mean. Otherwise, I could interpret it in another way again. And for example, I was in a situation where I thought that it would help me enhance my power to accommodate. And so I said yes. But again, if I had used another power, which is power to face, then I would have said no.
Right. But then you got experienced and you gave yourself a message, which is don't be afraid to say no. Mm-hmm. You see, in BKs, you always hear Haji, Haji, Haji all the time. You have to say yes to everything. And along with Haji, there has to be Naji. And you need to know when to say no and how to say no. Mm-hmm. Because you have to be wise. You have to protect yourself when you need to protect yourself, and you have to make good decisions, which very often is about either you say yes or you say no, but you need to know which one is correct, because if you say yes where you should say no, you pay a high price. And if you say no where you should say yes, you lose a lot. So this is why experience is important, because things tend to arise in patterns. So you don't get a test only once. It'll come several times, and you have to pass it several times before it can be said that you passed it. So if you get a few failures, it's going to come around again, and you become more expert. And this is good. This is what is normal in the development of skill. If you think yoga is skill in action, you don't start off skilled, you become skilled. And when you make a mistake, I was thinking, when we look at the work that artisans do, carpenters or stonemasons or whatever, they make incredible things, and they're just workers, they don't get paid much, but they have incredible art. And how did they get to that level? Is because somebody was shouting and screaming at them that they were no good. You better be better or they'll get fired. Something like that goes on. And so our relationship with circumstances is sometimes something like that when we really don't do the right thing, circumstances will scream and shout at us, oh, what a fool you are, and wake up and get with the program, and then it'll give you another opportunity, and you become more confident in just the process of life.
There's a question here. When I am having a choice to make and not able to choose one from two choices, at that time, can I depend on drama to show me the right choice?
Well, I don't think that's a good idea, because you're avoiding. And when you have to make a choice, it is a very demanding situation, because you really don't know. It's again a situation where 20/20 vision in hindsight is there, but not at the time. And so you need to take time and calculate what are the benefits and what are the downside if you do it this way or if you do it that way. And so when I have to make a big choice, not necessarily a difficult choice, but a big choice, which means that if you choose this, there's no going back. And if you don't choose it, you miss the opportunity. So you have to, I think, be willing to take a risk. And I find in my experience, willingness to take a risk is very helpful in enabling us to advance. If you take a risk and it turns out really badly, there's plenty of good lessons in there. So as you move forward, with a number of situations where you can't decide which is which, and you are in an undecided state. And I've experienced that quite a bit, especially when I was a very young child, undecided. Do you want to do this? Do you want to come to the picnic or not come? And I would say, well, I don't know. Maybe I won't come. Maybe I will come. If I don't come, I'll feel left out. If I do come, I'll get bored, what to do. And so I think it's good to find oneself in that situation because you're accumulating a reservoir of pro and con regarding your sanskar of hesitancy or in being undecided. And I think a lot of the time, what's good for you in that is to accumulate more experience. Because it's experience that helps you to understand yourself better and to make choices that correspond with who you are rather than if something is overall better or not better according to, you don't really get told that it's up to you deeply, or sometimes you get told that It's not up to you. You have to decide between this thing and that thing and don't consider yourself. You have to consider yourself. So in that way, we're learning more refined points about what's important, and also give importance to yourself, because finally, you will die alone. And you, in many cases, you experience that, it's really up to each one. It's every man for himself. You will not necessarily get carried along by some greater force. So you have to be able to swim by yourself. And these circumstances help you to claim the power to be just yourself, and that you have faith in God, that God is there when needed, always, but he wants to see how competent you are in making your own decisions and standing up for yourself and standing your ground and looking after yourself, because you can, and don't be lazy and put it on somebody else.
There's a request here for a session on spiritual powers.
Yeah, I get that from time to time. But, in every session they come up.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a single session where we don't mention the powers, because they are really important and they apply in every area of our investigation. So because of that reason, I haven't gone along with the idea of taking the powers separately, because it sort of pushes us into a theoretical mode.
Mm.
But when we talk about the powers in the context of some situation, it's more hands-on, I think, more practical, better.
Yeah. And there's a comment here. I used to consider thoughts such as how the world is so tamo-pradhan. But after many years, I'm also appreciating more the beauty around me. I thought that accepting the reality, but also recognizing the good around me is helping me to move forward. I believe that Gyan and your sessions are helping me to reach this realization.
Great. That's good. Yeah. I mean, we are, if you think about it, very privileged, very fortunate. We are, first-class passengers in this boat that's crossing from one side to the other, because we have all this information, we have each other, we have incredible network, we live in a field of high-quality energy. And anytime any of us goes out in nature, we immediately realize how incredible it is, and that even if the world is a mess or ugly or whatever, but somehow nature creates this beauty. It sustains us even when under duress and drought and flood and everything. We somehow always find something to eat, most of us at least. So yes, very good to appreciate your bounty. Yeah.
Thanks for all illumination so far. Question: when my ego dies, what is then left of me?
When your ego dies, your carapace goes away. Carapace is like a shell, and in a way, you could say that in terms of metamorphosis, we always hear about the example of the caterpillar who goes into the chrysalis, and then finally the butterfly comes out. And I think when your ego dies, it's like the butterfly is coming out of the chrysalis, because the ego is in many ways a protective covering that allows you to do your inner work with some protection. The ego is a protector. And then when you're all ready, you can drop it. And Sometimes you're ready and you don't want to drop it, or sometimes you have to drop it in order to be ready. So, but I think what's left of you is you. And the ego is usually called false ego. And when everything that's not you goes away, then what's left is you, which is what you want.
There's a request. Could you please give me tips to put this knowledge into practice?
That's all I do. I just keep on giving tips and tops about how to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why, Sister Denise, I have said it again. It's really very beneficial to keep listening to the sessions because I am able to grasp more and more. This started way back, and I think in the 90s. And all these bits and pieces are helping until now.
Great, good. So, this is something that Daddy Genki used to react to how-to questions. You remember that? And anytime anybody would say, "Oh, Daddy, how can I have meditation? How can I make my bad sanskaras go away? How can I have a good stage?" And she would say, "Never ask me a how-to question. Just do it." And so, yeah, we always have how-to questions because we want to do it better. We are not certain if we're doing it right. And so I think the how-to questions do indicate that we want further explanation, maybe deeper explanation, or we want to hear more so that we grasp it better. And I think just continuing to have these discussions is good because we get insights, and then we have clarity, and then we move forward a bit because we are pilgrims on the pilgrim's way going along, aren't we?
There's a comment. It is so true that when I act according to my old sanskars, I find myself in bondage, whether be it in relationship, burdensome responsibilities. It is like I put myself in a mess. So yes, thanks for the tips regarding the importance of discernment.
Actually, I remember there was one particular Murli, I don't know the date, but it was a very powerful one, which said that the power of discernment is the most important of all powers. And if you don't have any other powers, but you have that, you're going to be fine. So discernment, very, very important to give attention to that.
This faith in myself. After many years of always, like looking at myself in a through a false mirror, my self esteem is very low, and so to go from that and then develop faith in myself is also not a very easy task.
Right. I think that low self-esteem is very much to do with one's social environment, because the parenting, the schooling, and the religious education is based on certain preconceptions. Like, for example, in Christianity, they say that as soon as you're born, you're a sinner, whether you did anything or not. And they don't go for reincarnation. You just arrive sinful, which is completely illogical. But a child who is told, okay, you're born sinful, they're assuming they're being told the truth. Mm-hmm. So you take that, okay, my existence is I'm a sinner, so that's it, end of story, no chance. And it causes a person to be overly critical of the self. And that when you compare yourself with anything, you find fault with yourself. Or there is a system in Catholicism that you have to go and confess your sins, you see. And if you didn't do any sins, or at least you can't remember any that you did, because you probably didn't do any sins, then you have to make some up, you see, because you can't confess nothing. Say, oh, I didn't do anything bad. The priest will say, come on, you're born in sin. You've got to have done some bad things. Tell me the truth, And it makes people doubt themselves. And you make it up. And it's just a way of diminishing the self. And that then becomes, I think, almost like a trauma. Mm-hmm. Because the response to this message that you get, that you are fundamentally a sinful soul, is strong. And one thing I like especially about the knowledge is your identity is you are a pure, peaceful, powerful, loveful, blissful being of light, and have a nice day. You're not a sinner. You might be someone who did some sins, but that's not your identity, you see. And in parenting, children hear the expression, oh, why can't you be more like your brother, sister, father, mother, aunt, uncle, grandfather, or whatever, which means you are nothing. Mm. Or they say, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's like you're nothing until you grow up, and then you can be a carpenter or something, which is not anything to do with who you are. So I think that a lot of this has to do with these messages, which are based on ideas that come from the culture, the religion, the education system. And so these are the what I call toxic moral authorities in parenting, schooling, and religion. So I think it's very interesting that God says, guess what? I'm not just only God, but in addition to that, I am your father. So I give you your identity, and that's that. I am your teacher. I will tell you what's what. And I am your guru. So I will take you to the soul world. Don't worry about anything. This is my job. And these three relationships are the greatest influence on a person's thinking while they're growing up. So what he's saying is, all these messages that you heard from your parents, teachers, and religious leaders, put it on one side because it's not necessarily true. And let me tell you a few things, and then you decide which is true. And if you think that what I'm telling you is true, then just drop the other stuff, because it's actually not only is it not true, but if you take it on board, it's somewhat damaging. Yeah. So I think that all of us have to, in a way, heal from having adopted its damaging concepts of our identity and value and, meaningfulness. And that takes a whole lifetime's work, because you can't drop it just like that.
Can you talk more about the heart? Is it not the solution to speak from the heart to the heart of other soul in a different situation? Then the relation can be changed to be positive and interfere with benevolence to the person who is not gentle to you. Couldn't it be the solution? I believe in that, even if it is difficult to put into practice.
Oh, well, then go with it. I think that's all very good. And if you do speak from the heart, you remember in the Murli that we had today, Baba talked about if you speak with power, then your arrow will hit the target.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one interpretation of speaking with power is you're speaking from the heart. You're real. And you will make contact with the other being. I think when a person is reacting to a situation, speaking from the ego, it just creates a lack of communication. When you're speaking from the heart, it means that you're real, genuine, and a person will listen to somebody who's speaking from the heart. They'll know if you're speaking from the heart. And if you're just mouthing off platitudes or theoretical concepts, there's no contact between beings. So the heart really refers to a genuine connection between beings. You see, your heart is really the core of your being, which really means the soul. And so when Baba talks about you have a soul relationship, soul to soul, that's the same as heart to heart. So in many ways, heart and soul is the same thing. But we tend to be educated and conditioned to operate from the intellect, which is the theoretical thing, which is a covering, And when you drop that one, which is, again, connected with the ego, and you get to your core and you communicate from your core, and you're completely open and honest, you're not trying to protect yourself from any possible dangerous person out there who might insult you or otherwise expose you. That's called courage. And courage is a word that comes from the heart as well. So when you're being very real, genuine, operating from the heart, courageous, willing to risk any kind of possible thing that could go wrong, but you are coming from your heart, that's very courageous. And obviously it's going to be the best thing.
Thank you again for another session that is full of richness and helps really a lot of us in moving in this journey. So I said in the beginning that this is the last session for the free will and predestination, because tomorrow Sister Denise is going to take up the topic, the art of complaining.
Yes, I think not many people thought that was the arts. Let's see how we go with it.
I remember, Sister Denise, in one of the sessions previously, you also talk of learning how to argue.
Arguing is important. Complaining, it's a big subject, and let's see where it takes us.
Thank you, Sister Denise.
Thank you.
Thank you. Om Shanti.